Hello and thank you for joining us on Newsweek, where we highlight some of the biggest stories that made the headlines recently. I'm Jacinta Agochukwu. This week, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, postponed governorship and state assembly election by a week, with the exercise now set to hold on the 18th of March. Also this week, Peter Obi of the Labour Party, Atiku Abubakar of People's Democratic Party, and Bola Tinubu of the ruling All Progressive Congress take the battle for the highest office of the land to court in the aftermath of 2023 presidential poll. Alternatively, a battle reserved from only senior advocates of Nigeria, with 89 of them believed to be hired. And later on the show, we will take a look at a tragedy that befell Lagos as a train crashed into a BRT bus carrying scores of passengers. 6 people were declared dead. All the details in a moment. Stay with us. Well, we begin with politics, where earlier in the week, the Independent National Electoral Commission postponed the governorship and state House of Assembly elections by 1 week. The election, earlier scheduled for Saturday, 11 March, will now hold on Saturday, 18th of March. The Commission said in a statement by its spokesperson, Festus Okoye. The statement said the postponement was to make for adequate timing to reconfigure the bimodal voter accreditation system ahead of the governorship and state assembly polls. The Presidential Election Tribunal has restrained the Commission from tampering with all sensitive materials, including the beavers used in the conduct of the presidential election, following the request by the candidates of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the Labour Party, LP, Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi, respectively, who rejected the outcome of the presidential election. Well, joining me to discuss this in the studio is Nelson Kujimi, political analyst and election observer. Good evening.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
It's good to have you on the show.
Yep.
Now, let's see how you're taking this idea of election postponement and what impact you think it will have on this candidate and their party.
Well, thank you very much. We all know what caused the postponement, except if we are trying to be clever by half. And it is the fact that one of the parties, or 2 of the parties that lost the election, lost the presidential election, in which Ashwaji Bola Tinubu was declared the winner by the Independent National Electoral Commission, went to court to restrain INEC from, touching or tampering with the sensitive electoral materials. And INEC, knowing fully well that she had an election to conduct in 2 weeks' time, now approached the courts, stating the reasons why she has to, to touch those sensitive materials, most especially the beavers. And after availing the courts with the facts, I think the court saw reason with, our prayers and granted it the right to go and, reconfigure the beavers machine. Even before now, we used to have the smart card reader, and we all know that the smart card reader has to be reconfigured for subsequent elections after being used for a previous one. So the same thing has happened in this case. And to be able to reconfigure over 176,000 beavers machine, INEC came out clearly and told the whole world that they will require a minimum of 5 days. And if you recollect that order for them to go ahead and reconfigure the machine was given on a Wednesday, which made it impossible for that 5 days, to be met, because they just had a Thursday and a Friday, meaning that they had just 2 days to reconfigure the machine. And INEC, in its wisdom, when the management sat down and looked at all the available indices, decided that in the interest of ensuring that they conduct the elections in tandem with the provisions of the Electoral Act, that the most responsible thing to do was to shift the election by 1 week. And that is exactly what they have done. A lot of commentators have gone to town with the intention to mislead, and incite Nigerians. But, I think we must commend Nigerians for, recognizing that, look, this was the most logical and rational thing to do, that no matter what, people, some other persons come to say in order to confuse and mislead us, we are not falling for it. Because the beavers machine does not recognize whether you are voting for party or party B. What it does is to accredit you. Well, even if you get the ballot paper, maybe at the end of the day, you even don't print for 5 parties at the same time, or just drop the ballot paper into the ballot box. The beavers machine does not know that.
Now, Cindy, a lot of argument have been pouring in about this beavers reconfiguration. Some IT experts are saying there's no need for the reconfiguration. What do you make of this?
Oh, I think they are speaking from the point of ignorance. Because it's a fact, like I just told you, I took you historically. I took you down history lane. And the history lane is that in 2019, we had a smart card reader. And what the smart card reader does is to authenticate a voter, that the person standing before the presiding officer is the owner of the PVC that he or she has brought. And because of the fact that the smart card reader was being shortchanged, where the smart card reader made provisions for incidence form, where the smart card reader cannot capture, biometrically, the voters at the polling station. A lot of times people just boycotted the incidence form, and all sorts of malpractices were allowed to take place. But with the beavers machine, the rule is that if the beavers does not authenticate you, then you have no right to vote. We have all seen that part of the fallout of the use of the beavers was what happened in the Osun State gubernatorial election, where the number of votes counted was far beyond the number of people accredited by the beavers. And what does that tell us? It tells us that there was overvoting, that there was irregularity. Whether the ballot papers were stuffed into it or they were packed into it, the beavers has shown that, say, for example, 90 people were accredited. So how can 110 or 120 vote? So it means an electoral malpractice occurred. And that was why the Osun State Gubernatorial Election Petition Tribunal nullified the election of Governor Demola Adeleke of the PDP. So the people who are saying they don't need to reconfigure the beavers, I think they need to go and get understanding of what the beavers machine is all about. All
right, let's talk about INEC. There are still questions about INEC, about trust, credibility, and competence concerning as regards to the idea of backing up data on cloud. People are saying they can't trust INEC to do that. What do you make of this in terms of enlightenment and all of that?
Well, I am not surprised. And I won't be disappointed if people say they don't trust INEC, because of the fact that you cannot give what you don't have. A lot of these persons talking don't even have trust in themselves. For you to be able to give out trust to others, you must first of all have that quality of trust, that virtue of trust in yourself. So a lot of people who come out and say we don't trust INEC, they are speaking for themselves. They are exhibiting what they represent and what they stand for. Because so far as the 2023 presidential election is concerned, that election was free, fair, successful, and credible. And why do I say this? INEC has conducted an election. They were quoting provisions of the Electoral Act, and the provisions of the Electoral Act makes it very clear that the right to determine how they want to transmit election results lies solely with INEC. INEC is not, stereotyped to either electronically or manually. It is left for INEC to transmit. And one fact you cannot take away from INEC's performance in this election is that this election took place in over 176,000 polling units. Those polling units had party agents and security operatives in which the party agents signed the result sheets, meaning that they consented to the free and fairness of the process at that level. And from from the polling station level, the results were gathered to the ward level. A number of polling stations make up a ward. And at the ward level, you had party agents again and security operatives who also, attested to the fact that the result that has been collated from the various polling stations, is what we are entering into the order form. And they all signed, and got a copy. At every stage, party agents as well as security operatives, according to provisions of the Electoral Act, they must get a copy of results. From the ward level, it now graduated to the local government level, where we also have party agents and security operatives. At these levels, we had INEC officials who are assigned, to take up responsibility at those levels. Is it at the polling units? You have the presiding officer, the PO. At the ward level, you had the ward collation officer of INEC. At the local government level, you had the local government collation officer. He signed these results that has been collated from the wards up to the local government level, and parties agents sign and they get a copy before now transferring it to the state collation center, where parties also have agents who did the same thing.
We just have to take a time out, and Newsweek continues in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's Newsweek, where we discuss the biggest stories that made the headlines in the week. Now, the legal tug of war between the Labour Party, People's Democratic Party, and the ruling All Progressive Congress over the outcome of February 25th presidential election has taken a new turn following reports that a combined team of 89 senior advocates of Nigeria have been engaged for post-election litigation. The APC candidate Bola Tinubu polled more than 8 million votes to defeat the People's Democratic Party candidate Atiku Abubakar and the Labour flag bearer, who got 6.9 and 6.1 million votes respectively. Atiku and Obi rejected the results announced by INEC, with each claiming at separate press conference that the election was fraught with violence and rigging. The three major candidates have now approached the court to seek permission for the inspection of election materials used during the poll. Well, joining me via Zoom to discuss this is Chino Obiago, lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria. Good evening, Mr. Chino Obiago.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
All right, it's obvious that we are yet to hear the last of this election. Now, the opposition candidate who came second and third respectively rejected the emergence of the All Progressive Congress candidate, Bola Tinubu, as the winner of the election. Do you think this court battle could have been avoided?
Well, I don't think so, because Nigerian politicians are always prone to approach the courts, even at slightest disagreement. And we have said that electoral disputes, even at primary elections level, political primary election level, are always turned to the courts. And we have seen almost at every general election, every turn of election, the courts play a central role in determining electoral disputes. So we had expected that this would have come up at this time.
All right, let's talk about the 89 senior advocates of Nigeria that have been engaged in this battle. This is not to preempt the court, but how far can you see this to linger? What do you expect?
Well, the courts have always election. I'm not sure there's any presidential election that has not been disputed. Maybe not all the candidates, but most candidates will dispute the result of election, because I think there is still some lack of faith in the political society about the electoral process. It's still a work in progress, trying to achieve free, fair, transparent, and credible election. And I think INEC is working towards that. The introduction of beavers you have helped to improve the transparency of elections. But of course, we all know that there are technical issues which undermine the credibility of the process, because results were not uploaded from the polling unit directly as was promised by INEC. And that has raised doubts about the credibility of the results. And everybody has a right to go to court. Any of the candidates has a right to go to court. Remember that there are other candidates in this election, not just the PDP, Labour Party, and the APC candidates. So we expected that they will go to court and they're going to, assemble legal minds. There's going to be a legal fireworks at the tribunal, which is the Court of Appeal, as well as.
All right, China, before I let you go, I want to also find or get your thought on this. Do you think it's healthy for the nation's democracy to have the court keep deciding for Nigerians? What implications does this have on our democracy?
Frankly, we have said it several times that the role of judiciary in the electoral dispute in Nigeria is highly discrediting the judiciary. In fact, the courts should not be involved in decisions about elections because who is elected is a decision for the electorate, for the citizens. The way we see the courts engaging in deciding every political dispute, every electoral dispute, that undermines the right of franchise of Nigerians because the Supreme Court or the courts we select candidates rather than the electorate. We have always discouraged the courts from even going to things like political party primary election disputes because internal politics of the political primaries should guide the political party. The political party should have its own special electoral dispute resolution mechanism. We think that elections and electoral disputes should be separated from the normal court system because it is greatly undermining the judiciary, undermining the credibility of the judiciary. Because once the judiciary gets involved in politics, there's a tendency that its integrity will be undermined, and then also undermines slows down the progress of democracy and the electoral democracy in this country. So we do think that gradually the court should begin to remove itself from electoral dispute. So that even if you mean setting up special electoral tribunal system that's completely separated from normal courts. Because what happens is that once election tribunal starts, all other matters in court are stalled. Everybody faces electoral tribunal for the next 180 days, 6 months. And that clearly undermines not just the court system, but also democracy.
All right, thank you very much for your contribution, Shino Obiago, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's move to our final story for tonight. Several passengers were feared dead on Thursday morning after a train and a BRT bus collided in Ikeja area of Lagos. The moving train ran into the BRT bus at PWD crossing in Ikeja and dragged it to Shogunle area of Lagos. The Lagos State Commissioner for Health, Professor Kinabayomi, says 32 patients rescued from the accident scene have been discharged. The commissioner added that the total of 102 victims were recorded and 6 confirmed dead. The 44-year-old driver, Lucian Oshimbajo, has appealed to victims of the accident to forgive him. Some survivors say he had his earpiece on while driving and ignored the directive of the flag officer at the rail line. He has been transferred to the State Criminal Intelligence and Investigations Department in Lagos. To have with me to discuss this is Nelson Ekujome, political analyst. Nelson, a lot of people believe this accident is avoidable. Do you agree?
Absolutely, I agree absolutely. If the driver had exercised caution, because a lot of times we see that our people, whether as commuters or as pedestrians, we don't have regard for the fact that the road or the rail line is, is a dedicated place for vehicles or for trains. When you are approaching the rail crossing, there's a sign post around there, warning. So you expect that any person driving or even walking should recognize that, look, this is a dangerous place. I must look right, look left, be sure that there's no train in sight. A lot of if you go along our railway corridor, you recognize that our people have turned it into markets. Immediately the train is approaching. In fact, the way we conduct ourselves when the train is approaching, if you are not conversant with the attitude, you'll be afraid. But when the train is approaching, they will open up. Immediately the train goes, they reconverge. And you are like, these people are not afraid. It's like they know, it's like they have a magic within them that they can use, to direct and redirect the train. So this accident could have been avoided if the driver of that bus, had observed the normal safety procedure at the railway crossing.
Speaking of the driver, he's been arrested and now has been subjected to psychiatric, physiological and drug tests. What do you think? How will you assess the response of the state authorities towards this accident?
Well, that is in line with global best practices because when accidents like that occur, the responsibility of the state is to investigate and make recommendations such that we won't have a reoccurrence. And subjecting him to those tests is to confirm if he was under the influence of, maybe drugs, maybe alcohol, or if he was, not in a good...
They said he had earpiece on his ears.
Yes, that will be left for the investigators, to prove, because when an accident occurs, you hear all sorts of stories. But I know for sure that is in, police custody. In the course of investigation, Nigerians should demand that the police avail us with the facts such that it will become a recommendation that we can all begin an advocacy around it, such that if you are driving, the normal slogan is that don't drink when you are driving. And if you are drinking, make sure you don't drive. We can now have the advocacy of if you are driving, make sure your earpiece is not on. That could also be an advocacy slogan for us here in Nigeria.
Let me also have your take on measures you would suggest that we prevent a similar occurrence in the future.
One of the measures I would want to suggest is for the Nigerian Railway Corporation, in conjunction with the various state governments where rail line passes, to erect a barricade such that people will not be able to trade, because this is not the first time we're having incidents like this.
Someone wondered what business does PRT bus have or has?
No, from the accounts of eyewitnesses and even the victims, it was the driver felt he would be smart enough to cross before the railway comes. So we need to have even railway barricades. I recollect when I was growing up, I grew up in Apapa, that's where I'm from. And when you see the railway vehicular crossing intersections on the road, there's always this barricade that when the train is coming, the barricade will come down. It will block the road. I also recognized it was there in Pensima, Agege at some point in time. I wouldn't know for now. And immediately the train passes, the barricade will lift up. Every vehicular and, human traffic can now proceed. So we need to, call on Nigerian Railway Corporation, because that is within their jurisdiction, to ensure that we erect these barricades across all intersections where, vehicles can pass. Not only in Lagos State, because we have seen this accident happen time and time and time. Before this accident, we had one somewhere in Abuja, where the woman, I think it was a woman in a car, and the train crushed the car. I can't recollect if, there were casualties. So I think I want to use this medium to call on Nigerians, to call on the management of Nigerian Railway Corporation to erect, gate barricades. Because when the gate barricades come down, nobody can pass. Because a lot of our people, whether they are driving a car or riding an Okada or even walking on foot, believe, oh, the train is still far, I can run across. But, you cannot predict what can happen. So I think we must call on the authorities, to put in place these measures to prevent a reoccurrence. My sincere condolences to the families of those who have died, to the Lagos State government and its, working personnel. Those who are injured, I wish them speedy recovery. And to the families of those who are gone, I pray that the Almighty will console them.
Of course, Amen. Thank you very much for your contribution. Nelson Ekujumi, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
As well, thank you for being part of the show. And that's our show for today. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our social media platforms at TVC News NG or on our social website at tvcnews.tv. I am Jacinta Gochuku. Until next week, it's goodbye.